A seasoned explorer vanished into the Amazon jungle and was never seen again. Colonel Percy Fawcett's final mission in 1925 was to find a mythical metropolis he called the Lost City of Z. For over a century, this legend has drawn treasure hunters and scientists into the green unknown, promising ruins of a forgotten civilization. But what if the truth is even more incredible than the myth? By the end of this, you will understand the real, discovered history that rewrites everything we thought we knew about the Amazon. We will follow Fawcett's obsessive quest, unravel the mystery of his fate, and reveal how modern technology finally uncovered the astonishing reality behind the fairy tale. Was there truly a lost city, or was the explorer chasing a phantom? What secret did the jungle keep hidden for 500 years? How does it feel to discover that some of our greatest adventure stories were pointing to a truth we could barely imagine? Colonel Percy Fawcett was a man carved from a different time. Born in 1867, he was a British Army officer who served in Ceylon and later became a skilled surveyor for the Royal Geographical Society. This was the age of gentlemen explorers, when vast blank spaces on the map were considered an affront to imperial knowledge, and Fawcett was sent to South America not for treasure but for lines on a page. His early missions involved mapping the contested borders between Brazil and Bolivia, a task that required immense physical endurance and a cool head in the face of unknown territory. It was during these grueling surveys that something shifted within him. He wasn't just drawing boundaries, he was listening. He spent time with indigenous guides and local rubber tappers, absorbing their stories of ancient stone cities hidden deep in the jungle, places they called by names like Cuhacugu or the City of the Moon. While other Europeans dismissed these tales as primitive superstition, Fawcett began to believe them. He wasn't just mapping geography, he was mapping a possibility. His personality was perfectly suited for obsession. He was famously stoic, surviving on minimal rations, pushing his body to extremes, and displaying a near-mystical belief in his own immunity to the jungle's dangers. He wrote of feeling a strange, protective force around him, a conviction that he was destined for a great discovery. This unshakable self-belief, combined with the tantalizing fragments of local lore, crystallized into a single, fixed idea. He called this theoretical lost civilization Z. It was not, in his mind, a simple village. He envisioned a sophisticated, ancient metropolis, perhaps connected to Atlantis or other lost worlds, a cradle of culture that predated the known civilizations of the Andes. Visualize grainy black and white photographs of Fawcett, his stern gaze fixed somewhere beyond the camera, standing in a pith helmet amidst towering trees. Picture the beautifully detailed, yet ominously empty maps of the Amazon from his era, with vast regions labeled simply unexplored. This was the man who walked into the Green Wall not as a conqueror but as a believer. And that belief would ultimately prove both his driving force and his fatal flaw. The year was 1906. Fawcett was deep in the uncharted borderlands between Brazil and Bolivia, a place where rivers twisted like serpents and the canopy blocked out the sky. His official task was to survey the remote Rio Verde, but his attention was pulled elsewhere. While navigating this difficult terrain, he began to notice things that did not belong. It wasn't the grand stone ruins he dreamed of, but something far more intimate and telling. Scattered along riverbanks and half buried in the jungle floor were fragments of ancient, finely made pottery. He described them as not crude but beautifully worked, painted with intricate geometric patterns. These were not the discarded tools of a nomadic tribe. They were the durable remnants of settled, sophisticated people. This material evidence was the first crack in the prevailing scientific dogma of the time, which held the Amazon as a green desert incapable of supporting large, complex societies. The artifacts whispered of a different past, one of permanence and artistry, but the real spark came from the people who lived there. His indigenous guides, men who knew the forest as an extension of themselves, shared stories passed down through generations. They spoke of a grand city of stone hidden far to the east in a region so remote and perilous that even they dared not go. They called it by old names, speaking of wide roads, tall towers, and immense wealth. For Fawcett, the pottery shards were proof, and the stories were the map, the two elements fused in his mind, transforming a vague local legend into a specific, tangible goal. It was in his subsequent reports and private letters that he first gave this phantom a name, a single, powerful letter that echoed the finality of a destination. Z. In that moment, Percy Fawcett, the surveyor, ceased to exist. He was reborn as Percy Fawcett, the seeker of Z. This expedition did not just add data to a map, it planted an unshakable obsession. The man who left England to chart borders returned home haunted by a vision, convinced he stood on the threshold of the greatest archaeological discovery of the age. The modern legend of the lost city of Z was not born from a dusty book or a scholar's theory. It was born in the humid, silent heart of the jungle, where a handful of broken pottery and the whispered memories of a people ignited a fire that would burn for a century. Fawcett's vision of Z was not conjured from thin air. It was carefully constructed, a mosaic pieced together from the fashionable theories of his era. The early 20th century was captivated by the idea of lost worlds. The myth of Atlantis, popularized by writers like Ignatius Donnelly, suggested a global network of advanced prehistoric civilizations that had vanished in a cataclysm. Scholars and adventurers alike speculated that survivors of such a disaster could have fled to remote corners of the earth, like the Amazon basin, and founded new societies. This idea resonated deeply with Fawcett. It provided a grand, romantic origin story for his lost city, elevating it from a mere archaeological site to a remnant of a primordial golden age. He began to weave these threads together, imagining Z not just as an indigenous city, but as a potential outpost of an even older global civilization. This intellectual backdrop gave his quest an epic scale, but it was a specific, crumbling piece of paper that offered what he believed was a tangible clue. In the archives of the National Library of Rio de Janeiro, Fawcett discovered a copy of an extraordinary document. Dated 1754, it was known as Manuscript 512. It was a report written by a Portuguese bandeirante, one of those ruthless fortune hunters who pushed into the Brazilian interior. The document described a staggering discovery. After a grueling expedition, the bandeirante's party claimed to have found a massive, abandoned city of stone, hidden in a remote mountain range. They wrote of a grand entrance archway, a wide street leading to a central plaza, and buildings adorned with strange hieroglyphic inscriptions. Most tantalizingly, they reported seeing silver in the ruins. For Fawcett, Manuscript 512 was a revelation. It was a historical account written over a century before his own travels that seemed to describe exactly the kind of place he was seeking. He pored over its vague geographical clues, trying to match its descriptions of rivers and mountains to his own maps. He chose to overlook the document's obvious problems. The bandeirantes were notorious for exaggeration, their reports often blending fact with tall tales to secure more funding from the crown. The description was frustratingly imprecise, and no such city had ever been verified. Yet Fawcett did not see a dubious colonial-era story. He saw corroboration. In his mind, the indigenous pottery, the local legends, the theory of Atlantis, and now this official-looking manuscript all pointed in one undeniable direction. Manuscript 512 became the pseudo-historical cornerstone of his quest. The old map that promised the treasure was real. It transformed his theory from a personal conviction into a historical detective story, with him as the hero destined to solve it. This document, more than any other single influence, locked his course. He wasn't just searching for a city anymore. He was following a trail he believed had been laid down for him 200 years prior. 1925 would be the year. After decades of dreaming, planning, and surviving earlier attempts, Percy Fawcett was finally ready for his definitive expedition. He had secured funding from a consortium of newspapers and scientific societies, all captivated by the promise of his lost city. But this journey was profoundly personal. His team was not composed of seasoned porters or fellow officers. It consisted of just two men, his 21-year-old son, Jack, and Jack's childhood friend, Raleigh Rimmel. Fawcett believed a small, tight-knit party could move swiftly and avoid the conflicts that plagued larger groups. He saw this as a sacred mission, a father and son adventure to claim a glory that would echo through history. Jack, an eager and athletic young man, shared his father's romantic ideals and thirst for adventure. Raleigh, more pragmatic but loyal, completed the trio. Their equipment was deliberately minimal, favoring rifles, machetes, and surveying tools over bulky supplies, trusting the land to provide. Their stated goal was unambiguous: to reach the region Fawcett had identified from his research, find the physical ruins of Z, document them scientifically, and return with proof that would silence all doubters. In April of that year, they sailed from England, a final photograph capturing them on deck, looking determined, even cheerful, unaware they were stepping into a legend from which they would never return. By late May, they were penetrating the Brazilian Mato Grosso, a name that translates to thick forest. This was the gateway to the unknown, a vast, roadless wilderness of swamp, thorn, and towering canopy. Their progress was slow, measured in painful miles each day. They followed rivers until they became impassable, then hacked their way overland. The environment was a relentless adversary, teeming with biting insects, venomous snakes, and oppressive, sapping heat. Yet Fawcett's letters, sent back with occasional guides or from remote outposts, remained remarkably optimistic. He wrote of seeing strange rock formations and signs of ancient habitation, interpreting every unusual hill or cluster of stones as potential evidence. His final communication is the cornerstone of the mystery. In late May, from a place called Dead Horse Camp, a location he had used years before, he dispatched a native guide back to civilization with letters for his wife and his financial backers. The letter to his wife, Nina, was confident and affectionate. He stated the party was healthy, their spirits high, and that they were about to cross into unexplored territory, heading east from the camp. He warned it might be many months, even a year or two, before they could make contact again. He asked her not to worry or mount a rescue unless all hope was truly lost. Then he signed off. The guide watched the three figures, Fawcett, Jack, and Raleigh, turn and walk into the wall of green. They were never seen by the outside world again. That simple, silent moment at the edge of Dead Horse Camp is the point of no return in every sense. Three men, carrying the hopes of an era's romance with exploration, vanished into a landscape that swallowed them whole. No wreckage was found, no grave, no last message carved on a tree. They simply ceased to be. The silence that followed was deafening. For 2 years, as Fawcett had predicted, the world waited. But when the silence stretched beyond any reasonable timeline, anxiety turned to dread. The first rescue mission was launched in 1928, funded by newspaper headlines screaming of the lost explorer. It found nothing but the same impenetrable jungle. That first mission sparked a bizarre and tragic phenomenon, the Fawcett curse. Over the next century, more than 100 explorers, adventurers, and fortune hunters would plunge into the Amazon trying to find clues to his fate. Many of them disappeared themselves or died from disease, animal attacks, or hostile encounters. The jungle seemed to guard its secret jealously, consuming those who came too close. Each failed search only layered more mystery onto the original disappearance. Did Fawcett find his city and choose to live there in seclusion, as some wild theories suggested? Did the small party fall victim to a hostile indigenous tribe, succumbing to disease, or simply get lost and perish from starvation? The complete absence of evidence became a blank canvas, and the world began painting its own terrifying or wondrous pictures. The man had sought a legend, and in failing to return, he became one. The silence from the jungle was absolute, but the noise back home quickly became deafening. When Fawcett's promised year of radio silence stretched into 2, then 3, the quiet worry of his family and backers erupted into a full-blown international mystery. Newspapers, particularly the ones that had funded his trip, seized upon the story with a fervor that blurred the line between news and adventure serial. Headlines screamed of the brave British colonel swallowed by the green inferno, of the lost city that must have claimed him. The public was captivated. Here was a real-life Victorian explorer, a man of science and empire, vanishing in pursuit of a fairy tale. Fawcett was no longer just a missing person, he was a symbol. The press painted him as the last of the gentleman adventurers, a tragic hero whose noble quest had been consumed by the very wilderness he sought to conquer. This media storm did one thing with brutal efficiency. It transformed a complex man and his obscure theory into a simple, irresistible legend. The lost city of Z was no longer an archaeological hypothesis. It was a headline, a prize waiting in the shadows. And where there is a legend of a prize, there will always be hunters. The first official rescue mission set out in 1928, funded by a consortium of American newspapers. It was led by a journalist named George Dyott, and its primary goal was not archaeology but copy. Dyott's expedition found Fawcett's final camp, Dead Horse Camp, and even reported hearing second-hand tales from indigenous people about 3 white men who had been killed. He returned with dramatic stories and some of Fawcett's leftover tin trunks, but no bodies, no proof. This pattern would repeat itself for decades. Each new search party, often financed by media outlets or wealthy thrill seekers, added another layer of speculation and tragedy to the story. Some searchers vanished entirely, like the Russian explorer Alexander von Tunzelmann, who disappeared in 1930 while looking for Fawcett. Others died from disease, snakebite, or in clashes with isolated tribes. The Amazon seemed to be defending its mystery, claiming a toll from anyone who dared to follow the trail. This string of failures created what became known as the Fawcett Curse, a superstition that the jungle itself would punish those who sought the colonel's fate. The quest even drew figures who were famous in their own right. In 1932, the celebrated author and journalist Peter Fleming, brother of Ian Fleming who would later create James Bond, embarked on a search. His expedition was a grueling, comic, and ultimately futile ordeal, which he later chronicled in his book Brazilian Adventure. Fleming's account was laced with wry British humor, detailing mosquito-plagued nights, unreliable guides, and the sheer absurdity of searching for a needle in a continent-sized haystack. His conclusion was that Fawcett had most likely perished from simple misadventure, but the book's popularity only fed the public's appetite for the myth. Each of these high-profile failures served a paradoxical purpose. They proved the danger was real, which made Fawcett's original courage seem all the more monumental. They also proved the mystery was unsolvable, which made the potential prize of Z seem all the more valuable. The story spiraled. Tabloids published wild theories that Fawcett had found the city and become a white god king of a hidden tribe, that he was being held captive, that he had discovered a portal to another world. The sober truth that a man and his son had likely died lost and alone in an unforgiving wilderness was not nearly as marketable as the epic saga the newspapers were selling. By the mid-20th century, Percy Fawcett and his city of Z had completed their journey from personal obsession to global pop culture phenomenon. He was the subject of novels, comic strips, and Hollywood films. The factual details of his life, his careful surveys, and his specific theories were buried under an avalanche of sensational speculation. The man was forgotten, but the legend thrived. This media-created myth performed a strange alchemy. It kept the story alive for generations, ensuring that the name Fawcett would never be erased from the history of exploration. But it also created a formidable barrier to the truth. Any real archaeological investigation into the Amazon's past would now have to contend with a century of accumulated fantasy, with an audience expecting stone towers and Atlantean treasure, not the subtle, earthbound reality that was actually waiting to be found. The jungle had hidden Fawcett's fate, and the modern world had shrouded his quest in a different kind of wilderness, one made of ink, headlines, and pure, undying imagination. The complete absence of a body or any definitive artifact meant the mystery was a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. Over the decades, a strange ecosystem of theories grew to fill the void, each one attempting to solve the ultimate riddle: what really happened after those three men walked away from Dead Horse Camp. The most persistent and perhaps the most logical explanation points to conflict. The region Fawcett was entering was, and in some places still is, home to indigenous tribes who had every reason to be hostile to outsiders. The history of the Amazon is scarred by violence from robber barons, slave traders, and other intruders. A small, vulnerable party of foreigners, no matter how well-intentioned Fawcett believed himself to be, could easily have been perceived as a threat. Stories filtered out from the jungle over the years, often third or fourth hand, telling of a group of white men being killed by this or that tribe. One recurring narrative named the Kalapalo people as the ones who ended the expedition. In the 1950s, a Kalapalo elder reportedly gave a detailed account to a visiting anthropologist, describing how the starving, weak foreigners were killed after offending the tribe. While compelling, these stories are impossible to verify and often contradict each other, leaving this theory in the realm of tragic possibility rather than proven fact. Then there is the jungle itself, a silent and efficient killer. Disease was a constant companion on any Amazonian expedition. Malaria, yellow fever, or a simple infected cut could disable and kill a man within days. Starvation was another grim reality. Fawcett's minimalist approach meant they carried few supplies, relying on hunting and foraging. In an unfamiliar and sometimes barren stretch of forest, that gamble could have failed. A wrong turn, a flooded river, or a lost trail could have left them disoriented and hopelessly lost, their fate becoming a slow, quiet surrender to the elements. This theory lacks drama, but it carries the heavy weight of statistical likelihood. Many explorers before and after Fawcett met exactly this kind of undramatic, anonymous end. But the human imagination, fueled by the romantic legend, demanded a more extraordinary conclusion. Thus sprang the most tantalizing theory of all, that Fawcett actually found what he was looking for. In this version, he didn't die, he transcended. He discovered the lost city of Z, was welcomed by its enlightened inhabitants, and chose to renounce the modern world to live there in peace and wisdom. This idea was fueled by Fawcett's own mystical leanings and by later, dubious claims from mystics and mediums who said they had made psychic contact with him in his hidden jungle paradise. It is a beautiful story, a fitting end for a man who sought a fairy tale, but it exists entirely without a shred of physical proof. The lack of evidence, however, did not stop a parade of individuals from claiming they had found some. Throughout the mid-20th century, various explorers and adventurers emerged with sensational reports. One man claimed to have found Fawcett's bones. Another said he had recovered the colonel's signet ring. A skeleton was once presented to the Royal Geographical Society for identification, only to be proven through dental records to belong to someone else entirely. These false leads and hoaxes served a dual purpose. They briefly reignited public fascination, selling newspapers and books, but they also further muddied the waters, making the sober search for truth even more difficult. Each disproven clue was a small funeral for hope, yet it paradoxically kept the story alive. The very fact that people kept looking and kept finding tantalizing dead ends proved that the mystery had lost none of its power. In the end, the multitude of theories tells us less about Fawcett's fate and more about ourselves. We project our own fears of the wild, our romantic ideals of discovery, and our desire for a neat ending onto that empty space on the map. The truth is, the Amazon is vast enough to hold all these possibilities and keep its final secret forever. For generations, the story of Z was told as a European explorer's quest, a solitary white man battling the savage jungle for a glorious prize. But that narrative is not just incomplete, it is fundamentally backwards. To find the real truth behind the legend, we must finally listen to the people who were there all along, the descendants of the very civilization Fawcett was seeking. Modern anthropologists and indigenous rights advocates have initiated a profound shift in perspective. They point out that for countless Amazonian tribes, there was never anything lost about these places. The dense rainforest is not a pristine wilderness, but a living archive, a carefully managed garden that holds the memory of their ancestors. Tribes like the Kuikuro, the Kalapalo, and the Yawalapiti in the Upper Xingu region have oral histories that speak of large, fortified villages, wide ceremonial plazas, and complex social networks that existed long before the first European ship touched South American shores. These were not myths to them, they were home. So when Fawcett's guides whispered of stone cities, they were likely describing the tangible, albeit overgrown, remnants of their own grandparents' world. The fatal flaw in Fawcett's vision, and in the colonial mindset he embodied, was a failure of imagination. He was searching for a specific type of city, one that matched a European or Andean ideal, built of enduring stone, with pyramids and palaces meant to last for millennia. The Amazon, however, built with a different logic. In a hot, humid environment where stone is scarce and wood is plentiful, the most advanced architecture was built from earth and living trees. Imagine not a city of granite, but a metropolis of soil. Enormous geometric earthworks, vast raised agricultural fields, complex networks of canals and causeways, and large circular villages centered on communal plazas. These structures were sophisticated feats of engineering and landscape management, but to an outsider expecting medieval castles, they could look like mere hills or natural clearings once the forest reclaimed them. Fawcett's lost city was likely not a single fantastical ruin, but a misinterpretation of this widespread indigenous reality. He took fragments of truth, pottery shards, and local histories, and forced them into the shape of a familiar fairy tale, missing the actual, living civilization that surrounded him. The real city wasn't lost, it was simply built in a language he did not understand, from materials he did not value. This reframing is more than an academic correction, it is an act of historical justice. It moves the story from a lone adventurer's obsession to a recognition of a profound, continuous human achievement. The mystery of Z begins to dissolve, not because there was nothing there, but because we were looking for the wrong thing in the wrong way, blinded by our own myths. The jungle had been speaking all along, in a chorus of living voices and subtle earthworks. The question was no longer where was the lost city, but were we finally ready to see the civilization that had never disappeared? The romantic search for a single lost city was about to be rendered obsolete by a quiet scientific revolution. For decades, archaeologists working in the Amazon faced a frustrating paradox. They had the oral histories and the scattered pottery, but the jungle floor seemed to stubbornly refuse to yield the grand ruins that would prove a complex society existed. The problem was one of perspective and material. They were looking for stone in a world built of earth, and they were standing in the middle of the forest when they needed a bird's-eye view. The breakthrough came not from a daring expedition, but from the slow, meticulous study of the soil itself. Researchers began to notice patches of incredibly fertile, dark earth, often several feet deep, scattered throughout the basin. The indigenous people called it terra preta, or black earth. This was no ordinary dirt. Laboratory analysis revealed it was a human-made super soil, a deliberate creation engineered by ancient Amazonians. It was a rich blend of charcoal from controlled burns, broken pottery, composted waste, and other organic matter. This terra preta did not occur naturally. It was manufactured on a massive scale to transform the notoriously poor rainforest soil into a lasting, nutrient-rich foundation for agriculture. This discovery was a game changer. It provided the physical, chemical proof of exactly what Fawcett's critics said was impossible: large-scale, permanent settlement. You cannot have terra preta without a large, stable population to create and maintain it over centuries. It was the signature of a civilization that didn't just live in the Amazon, but actively sculpted and improved it, turning the forest into a vast, productive garden. The dark earth was the literal ground truth, the foundation upon which everything else was built. But if terra preta proved they could live there, a new technology would soon reveal how they lived and on what staggering scale. That technology is called LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Imagine being able to peel back the entire leafy canopy of the rainforest with a laser, stripping away every single tree and bush in an instant to see the naked earth beneath. That is essentially what LiDAR does. Mounted on aircraft, it fires millions of laser pulses at the ground. By measuring how long each pulse takes to bounce back, it can create a fantastically detailed, three-dimensional map of the ground surface, ignoring the vegetation completely. When archaeologists first flew LiDAR over regions of the Amazon, like the Upper Xingu in Brazil or parts of Bolivia, the results were nothing short of breathtaking. The maps that came back were not blank. They were etched with the ghostly footprints of a lost world. Suddenly, they could see with perfect clarity what had been invisible for centuries: enormous geometric earthworks, perfect circles and squares spanning hundreds of feet, connected by long, straight causeways and roads that ran for miles. They saw the outlines of vast plaza complexes, moats, and raised platforms for villages. This was not a single lost city. This was an entire networked landscape, a civilization of garden cities woven into the fabric of the forest. The scale was humbling. One study in the Brazilian state of Mato Grosso revealed over 450 large geometric earthworks across an area the size of Great Britain. Another in the Bolivian Amazon showed a complex of raised fields, canals, and settlements that could have supported a population in the millions. The evidence from the air was irrefutable. The Amazon before European contact was not a pristine, untouched wilderness dotted with a few small tribes. It was a profoundly humanized environment, a managed, engineered landscape that supported societies of a complexity and scale we are only beginning to comprehend. The lost city Fawcett sought was a fantasy, but the truth he sensed of a great civilization hidden in the green was real. He was simply looking for a castle when the entire kingdom was lying beneath his feet, written not in stone but in soil and shadow. The laser maps revealed a civilization, but it took archaeologists on the ground to give it a name and a story. In the late 1990s, a young researcher named Michael Heckenberger began working in the Upper Xingu region of Brazil, not with a treasure map but with a simple desire to listen. He partnered closely with the Cuicuro people, one of the indigenous groups living there today. For generations, the Cuicuro elders had spoken of their ancestors' great settlements, places with names like Cuicugu. They knew where the old roads had been, where the plazas once stood, where the protective moats were dug. They were living with the ghost of a city every single day. Heckenberger's genius was to take their oral history not as myth, but as a precise surveyor's guide. When he and the Cuicuro teams began to excavate, the earth gave up its secrets exactly where the stories said they would be. What they uncovered was not a lone, isolated ruin, but an entire planned landscape. From roughly 1250 to 1650 AD, this area was a bustling network of towns and satellite villages, perhaps housing tens of thousands of people. These settlements were not randomly placed. They were connected by wide, straight roads that ran for miles, often raised causeways to keep them dry during the rainy season. Each major town was laid out in a precise circular or oval pattern, centered on a large public plaza. Surrounding these residential hubs were elaborate systems of moats and palisades, not just for defense, but likely for managing water and defining social space. Beyond the towns lay the true engine of this society: vast areas of managed forest, orchards of fruit and nut trees, and those incredibly fertile terra preta gardens. This was a garden city civilization, a seamless blend of urban planning and ecological engineering. Now, think about the descriptions that reached Percy Fawcett's ears decades before this discovery. His guides spoke of a great city of stone, yes, but they also spoke of wide roads, large plazas, and complex fortifications. They spoke of a place of immense scale and order. Fawcett heard these details and imagined them in European terms, translated them into castles and pyramids. But the Cuicuro stories, the very same tradition, were describing Cuicugu all along. The roads were real, but they were earthen causeways, not paved Roman streets. The plazas were real, but they were packed soil, not marble courtyards. The moats and walls were real, but built from the forest itself. This is why Cuicugu stands as the most compelling real-world inspiration for the legend of Z. It was not a single, monolithic lost city, but a constellation of them, a sophisticated civilization that flourished for centuries. It matches the scale and complexity that fueled the rumors, and it existed in the very region where Fawcett was searching. He was not chasing a total fiction, he was chasing an echo, a memory of a place that had been abandoned after European diseases devastated the population, allowing the forest to swiftly reclaim its works. The lost city was never truly lost to the people who remembered it. It was only lost to the outsiders who finally arrived, looked at the green mound and the ancient trail, and could not see the metropolis for the trees. Cuicugu was not a solitary wonder in an empty jungle. It was part of a chorus, one voice in a continent-wide symphony of human achievement that we are only now beginning to hear. Across the entire Amazon basin, from the foothills of the Andes to the mouth of the great river, the same story is being written in the soil. Take the southwestern Brazilian state of Acre. Here, in areas long cleared for cattle ranching, a startling pattern emerged from the ground, not from the air. Etched into the earth are hundreds of enormous geometric designs, circles, squares, and octagons, some over 1,000 feet across. These are the Acre geoglyphs, and they are not natural. They are massive ceremonial earthworks, ditches, and embankments dug with astonishing precision over 2,000 years ago. They were not fortifications or villages, but likely spaces for ritual and gathering, proof of a shared cultural and spiritual life that organized labor on a staggering scale. Moving southeast into the Bolivian lowlands, we find the Llanos de Mojos, a vast seasonal savanna that floods for half the year. To the first European explorers, this looked like an impossible place for civilization. They were wrong. Ancient peoples here transformed this challenging landscape into a breadbasket. They built thousands of raised agricultural mounds, artificial islands of fertile soil that stayed above the floodwaters. They dug complex canals and causeways to manage water flow, creating a kind of managed wetland that supported large, permanent populations. This was not just farming, it was landscape-scale engineering, a dialogue with the water that turned a problem into a resource. And then, just a few years ago, LiDAR technology unveiled perhaps the most breathtaking discovery yet in the Bolivian Amazon. The laser maps revealed not just isolated mounds, but two vast urban centers hidden under the canopy near the town of Casarab. The imagery showed stepped platforms towering over 60 feet high, concentric rings of defensive moats and walls, and a network of causeways connecting the core cities to smaller suburban settlements and reservoirs over many square miles. This was urban planning on a level no one had attributed to the Amazon, a low-density tropical urbanism that blended city and forest seamlessly. The scale is almost incomprehensible. These were not villages, they were carefully designed population centers, home to tens of thousands of people, practicing sophisticated aquaculture, agriculture, and monument building. The picture that solidifies is not of a single lost city, but of a lost world, a civilization, or more accurately, a tapestry of related civilizations that mastered their environment with a genius we are only starting to appreciate. They moved millions of tons of earth, rerouted water, enriched poor soils, and built monuments and roads that organized space for ceremony, commerce, and community. Percy Fawcett's great era was one of singular focus. He sought one city, one prize, one name on a map. The truth, as it so often is, was far more magnificent. The real discovery is that the Amazon was not a green desert, but a cradle of human innovation. The lost city he dreamed of was real, but it was everywhere and nowhere, a civilization woven so deeply into the land that when it faded, the forest simply grew over it, keeping its secrets safe for 500 years. Percy Fawcett's greatest mistake was searching for a single dot on the map. The truth, now emerging from the soil and the satellite data, reveals something far more profound. The lost city of Z was not a place, it was a people. It was the collective memory of the vast, complex societies that once thrived across the entire Amazon basin. For centuries, the legend spoke of one glittering metropolis, an El Dorado of stone. But archaeology tells a different, more human story of a civilization built from earth and community, a network of garden cities connected by roads and shared knowledge. This was not a mythical kingdom waiting to be found by a lone hero. It was a living, breathing world. That world ended not with a dramatic battle or a natural cataclysm, but with a silent, invisible killer. When European explorers and colonists first made contact along the rivers, they brought with them a suite of diseases against which the indigenous peoples had no immunity. Smallpox, measles, influenza. These illnesses raced ahead of the explorers themselves, traveling down trade routes and along those very causeways that connected communities. The result was a demographic catastrophe almost beyond imagining. Historians estimate that within the first century of contact, up to 90% of the Amazon's population may have perished. Whole villages were wiped out in a matter of weeks. The survivors, devastated and vastly reduced in number, could no longer maintain the grand infrastructure of their ancestors. The raised fields went untended. The ceremonial plazas were no longer swept clean. The complex canals silted up. Without human hands to hold it back, the jungle, which they had so carefully managed for generations, rushed in with astonishing speed. Within a few human lifetimes, the engineered landscape vanished beneath a green blanket. The cities were not destroyed, they were simply abandoned and forgotten by all but a few. This is where the legend finds its seed. The few surviving groups, the ancestors of today's Guaycurú and Kalapalo, carried the stories of the old times, of the great settlements and the wide roads. These tales, passed down over generations, became condensed and mythologized. The memory of an entire civilization, of many linked towns, likely fused in the telling into the story of one magnificent lost city. When rubber tappers or explorers like Fawcett later heard these stories, they interpreted them through their own cultural lens, imagining stone towers and golden idols. They heard a description of Guaycurú's Plaza and pictured Rome. The real, earthly truth had been transformed into a European-style fairy tale. So, in a stunning twist, Percy Fawcett was both profoundly wrong and intuitively right. He was wrong about the form. He sought stone in a world of earthworks. He was wrong about the location, fixating on one specific coordinate when the civilization was spread over thousands of square miles. And he was profoundly wrong about his own role, seeing himself as a discoverer unlocking a secret, when he was really a latecomer listening to the faint echoes of a tragedy. Yet, against all odds, he was right about the core premise. He insisted, against the scientific consensus of his day, that the Amazon could and did support a great, advanced civilization. His error was one of specificity, not vision. He sensed the ghost in the machine but tried to give it a single face and a single name. The real lost city of Z, then, is not a destination to be reached. It is a historical reality to be understood. It is the story of millions of people who built a world in harmony with the most demanding environment on Earth, a world that flourished for centuries and then faded into the trees, leaving behind only dark earth, geometric shapes in the soil, and stories that would tantalize the world. Fawcett spent his life chasing a phantom reflection in a jungle pool. He never realized he was standing in the ruins of the very thing he sought, simply because the ruins were the land itself. The romantic quest for a lost city casts a very long and very dark shadow. For every Percy Fawcett who vanished into the green, there were dozens of other outsiders who pushed their way in and came out again, leaving a trail of disruption in their wake. The search for Z was never a victimless adventure. Its true cost was paid by the indigenous peoples whose homes were treated as a blank space on a treasure map. From the very beginning, these expeditions were intrusions. Fawcett himself, for all his respect for certain guides, was an armed foreigner leading small parties through territories belonging to tribes who had no reason to trust a stranger. His disappearance and the sensational legend it created effectively painted a target on the entire region. The century of rescue missions and copycat adventures that followed brought a relentless wave of outsiders. Many of these men were not careful scholars. They were fortune hunters, journalists chasing a headline, or adventurers seeking glory, and they often saw the indigenous inhabitants not as hosts or descendants, but as obstacles or sources of information to be coerced. Violence was a grim reality. Expeditions were frequently armed and clashes occurred. There are tragic accounts from the 20th century of search parties firing upon villages, taking hostages, or burning dwellings in their frantic push to find clues. Even without bullets, the damage was profound. These outsiders brought new diseases to isolated communities with little immunity, repeating the original demographic catastrophe that had felled the ancient civilizations in the first place. A common cold or flu virus carried by a well-meaning explorer could wipe out an entire family group. The quest for a dead civilization repeatedly endangered living ones. This leads to the central, painful irony of the entire story. The modern searchers were looking for the ruins of a great society, while often showing disregard or outright hostility to the living descendants of that very society. The Kuikuro, the Kalapalo, and other groups of the Upper Xingu are not merely neighbors to the ruins of Kuhukugu. They are its cultural heirs. Their oral histories were the map, their knowledge of the land was the key, and their ancestors were the builders. Yet for decades, they were treated as background characters in someone else's adventure, their stories mined for clues but their sovereignty and their pain ignored. The ethical problem is stark. The myth of a lost city inherently suggests the land is empty, waiting to be discovered, but the Amazon is not and never was empty. It is a homeland. The search for Z perpetuated a colonial mindset that valued a romanticized past over a living present. It framed the jungle as a puzzle for outsiders to solve, rather than a complex, inhabited world with its own rules and rights. Today, as archaeologists finally collaborate with indigenous communities, a new model is emerging. The real discovery isn't extracting a secret from the land, but listening to the people who have always held it. The lost city was never lost to them. The greater loss was our willingness to hear what they had been saying all along. The story of Fawcett and his city refused to stay buried in the jungle. It found fertile ground in the modern world, sprouting into a cultural phenomenon that reshaped the legend for new generations. The single most important force in this revival was a book published in 2009. Journalist David Grann's The Lost City of Z became a global bestseller, not by rehashing old myths, but by embarking on a new kind of quest. Grann retraced Fawcett's final journey, but he also tracked the parallel path of modern science. His narrative brilliantly wove together the Colonel's tragic obsession with the groundbreaking archaeological discoveries that were finally proving Fawcett's core idea right, even as they dismantled his specific fantasy. The book presented a dual revelation: the haunting human story of a man consumed by a dream, and the stunning scientific truth of the civilization he sensed but could not see. It framed the entire saga not as a failure, but as a profound misunderstanding, a bridge between romantic folly and hard-won fact. When this story was adapted into a major motion picture in 2016, starring Charlie Hunnam as Fawcett, the legend reached its cinematic peak. The film visually captured the obsessive drive, the suffocating beauty of the jungle, and the heartbreaking family sacrifice. While taking artistic liberties, it cemented in the public mind the essential ingredients of the tale: the determined explorer, the unknowable wilderness, and the glittering prize just out of reach. But books and films were just the tip of the spear. The legend permeates deeper. It is the subject of countless documentaries, each trying to solve the mystery anew. It fuels storylines in video games and novels, where adventurers still hack through digital vines in search of forgotten gold. It even inspires brand names for outdoor gear and expedition companies. This enduring appeal taps into something fundamental. The story of Percy Fawcett is a perfect alloy of classic narrative elements. It is a high-stakes adventure into the literal unknown. It is an unsolved mystery, a true life detective story with no final chapter. It is a Shakespearean tragedy about hubris and the limits of human knowledge. And at its core, it speaks to our most ancient fascination, the dream of a hidden world, a place just beyond the map where wonders still wait. In an age where satellites have mapped every continent, the idea that something vast and magnificent could have been missed is incredibly seductive. Fawcett's story promises that not all mysteries are gone, that history still has secrets. We watch, read, and play these stories because on some level, we want to believe that we too could turn a corner and find something the world forgot, that the greatest discoveries might not be ahead of us in space, but behind us in time, waiting patiently under the green shade. The 21st century brought new tools to the oldest mystery. While the age of pith-helmeted adventurers faded, the quest to find Percy Fawcett did not. It simply upgraded its equipment. Modern expeditions now march into the jungle armed with GPS units, satellite phones, and high-resolution imagery, hoping technology can succeed where grit and luck failed for 100 years. The goal remains twofold: to find physical evidence of the man and to understand the civilization that lured him in. In 2005, on the 80th anniversary of Fawcett's disappearance, a high-profile expedition led by the filmmaker James Lynch and the explorer Benedict Allen set out. They carried a theory based on earlier research that Fawcett had not died at the hands of a hostile tribe, but had instead lived out his final years among a friendly group, the Kalapalo. The team used GPS to navigate precisely to areas mentioned in Kalapalo oral history. They even brought a forensic anthropologist. The journey was grueling, and they faced tensions with local communities, but they emerged with a compelling, though not conclusive, story. Kalapalo elders repeated a detailed account passed down through generations. They told of hosting the 3 weak and starving white men, of a conflict that arose, and of finally killing them. They even pointed to a specific location as the grave site. The team took soil samples for analysis, but no definitive human remains were found. The story was powerful, a tragic end woven into local memory, but it remained an oral history, not a case closed with evidence. This pattern repeats with almost clockwork regularity. Every few years, a new claim surfaces. An explorer announces he has found Fawcett's campfire ring. A local shows a brass button said to be from the colonel's uniform. In 2019, a British journalist claimed to have identified the exact location of Fawcett's skeleton using archival research. Each time the claim makes headlines, ignites brief excitement, and is then quietly scrutinized by experts. forensic analysis of supposed bones reveals they are from an animal or from a much more recent human. The brass button turns out to be from a 20th century farm implement. The specific coordinates lead to a patch of jungle indistinguishable from any other. The cycle is revealing. It shows our enduring need for a neat ending, for a skeleton with a signet ring that can finally put the story to rest. Yet the Amazon and rigorous science consistently refuse to provide it. The lack of a body has become a permanent part of the legend, a blank that allows every generation to project its own conclusion onto the green void. Just when it seems the mystery has exhausted all possibilities, science delivers a seismic reminder of how much we still do not know. In early 2024, a LiDAR survey over the Yupano Valley in Ecuador revealed a discovery that sent shockwaves through archaeology and reignited the public conversation about lost Amazonian cities. The lasers peeled back the canopy to expose a sprawling urban network of astonishing complexity. The imagery showed clusters of monumental platforms, plazas, and streets organized in a precise grid pattern, all connected by an extensive system of straight, raised causeways that ran for dozens of miles. This was not a handful of villages. This was a planned landscape of agricultural fields, drainage canals, and ceremonial centers, evidence of a highly organized society that thrived for nearly 1,000 years, beginning around 500 BC. The Yupano Valley sites are over 1,000 miles from Fawcett's search area, and they predate the Xingu settlements by centuries, proving the phenomenon was both older and more widespread than anyone had dared to hypothesize. For the public, the headlines were irresistible: lost cities found in the Amazon. For archaeologists, it was another monumental data point in rewriting continental history. And for the ghost of Percy Fawcett, it was the ultimate vindication of his instinct, delivered a century too late. Every such discovery, from Kuhakugu to the Yupano Valley, refreshes the old debate. It proves unequivocally that the Amazon was indeed home to great, interconnected societies. It validates the core truth Fawcett sensed in those pottery shards and local stories. Yet it also underscores his fundamental error in scale and form. He was looking for a needle when the haystack itself was the treasure. So where does this leave the man at the center of the storm? The likely truth of Percy Fawcett's fate is probably the simplest and most tragic. A small party, physically depleted, deep in uncharted territory, likely succumbed to accident, disease, or a fatal encounter. The jungle consumed them, leaving no trace for us to find. His personal mystery may never be solved, but the search he inspired has evolved into something far greater. It is no longer just a hunt for a lone explorer's bones. It is a collaborative, technological, and ethical quest to understand the true history of the Amazon and its people. The final clue is not a skeleton in the dirt. It is the dawning realization that the greatest lost city was never a place on a map, but a chapter in human history we are only now learning how to read. For centuries, the Amazon's greatest secret was its own roof. The dense, multi-layered canopy acted as a perfect shield, hiding the earth from prying eyes, whether they belonged to a hopeful explorer on the ground or a camera in a satellite. You could fly directly over a 2,000-year-old pyramid and see nothing but an unbroken sea of green. This fundamental problem of perspective made traditional archaeology in the rainforest a slow, frustrating, and often blind process of digging in the dark. Then a technological miracle changed the rules of the game. The key was not to look at the forest, but to see through it. That key is LiDAR. The name stands for light detection and ranging, and its principle is elegantly simple, though its execution is breathtakingly sophisticated. Imagine an airplane or a helicopter flying a precise grid pattern over a section of jungle. Mounted underneath is a device that acts like the world's most precise high-speed painter. It fires hundreds of thousands of laser pulses toward the ground every single second. Each pulse is a tiny bead of light, When that light hits something the very top of a canopy tree, a lower branch, a vine, or finally the solid ground, it bounces back to the sensor. The system measures with nanosecond precision how long that round trip took. Since we know the speed of light, that time measurement translates directly into a distance. Now repeat this process several billion times over a large area. What you get is not a photograph, but an immense, incredibly dense cloud of individual data points, each one a precise coordinate in three-dimensional space. Advanced software then sorts this chaos. It can filter out all the points that bounced back from vegetation, digitally stripping away every single leaf, branch, and trunk. What remains is a pristine, hyper-detailed digital model of the bare Earth surface, a map of the ground that hasn't been seen by human eyes for 500 years. The before and after is nothing short of magical. The before image is just a standard aerial or satellite photo, a textured carpet of green. The after image, the LiDAR-derived model, is a revelation. Suddenly, the land speaks in a language of geometry and intention. What looked like a natural hill is now clearly a flat-topped pyramid. A gentle, curving ridge resolves into the unmistakable outline of a massive defensive moat. Meandering animal trails are revealed to be straight, engineered causeways running for miles, connecting ceremonial plazas and residential platforms. It is like wiping fog from a window and discovering an entire city outside. This tool has turned the impossible into the prolific. Before LiDAR, confirming a single major site could take a lifetime of grueling groundwork and luck. Now, a single flight can survey hundreds of square miles, revealing dozens of potential sites in a matter of days. The discoveries have been staggering and have rewritten textbooks. In Guatemala, LiDAR unveiled a vast Maya megalopolis around Tikal, with tens of thousands of previously unknown houses, palaces, and fortifications, showing the civilization was far more populous and interconnected than ever believed. In Cambodia, it mapped the medieval sprawl of Angkor in unprecedented detail, revealing an urban and hydraulic network so vast it redefined the meaning of a city. And in the Amazon, its impact has been most revolutionary of all. It was LiDAR that definitively proved the scale of the garden cities in the Xingu region. It was LiDAR that mapped the staggering geometric earthworks in Acre, and it was LiDAR that just recently unveiled those immense urban centers in the Bolivian lowlands near Kasarab, with their towering platforms and sprawling suburbs. Each laser pulse is like a question fired into the past, and the echo that returns is an answer we are only beginning to understand. This technology does not just find lost cities, it allows us to see the minds of the people who built them. We can analyze the flow of water through their canals, trace the social hierarchy implied by the size and placement of their platforms, and understand how they organized their world. The romantic, dangerous quest of the lone adventurer has been replaced by the methodical, eye-opening scan of a machine. Science has finally given us the vision to see the civilization that Percy Fawcett could only feel in his bones, revealing that the greatest treasure was never gold, but knowledge written in the very shape of the land. These silent shapes in the soil are a language, and we are finally learning to read their grammar. The geometric earthworks, the causeways, the vast plazas, they are not random. Each form was a deliberate choice, a physical expression of a society's beliefs, needs, and genius. Take the enormous circular and square ditches found across Acre. Their perfect symmetry and immense scale, requiring coordinated labor from hundreds of people over years, point directly to a powerful, centralized social organization. Someone had the authority to plan these projects and mobilize the community to see them through, but their purpose was likely spiritual, not military. These were not forts, they were ceremonial spaces, perhaps used for gatherings, rituals, or astronomical observation, serving as a sacred calendar etched into the earth itself. This reveals a culture deeply connected to the cycles of the sky and the land, one that expressed its cosmology through monumental landscape art. The wide, straight roads tell another story entirely. They speak of connection and practicality. These raised causeways, sometimes running for over 10 miles, linked clusters of settlements into a single social and economic network. They allowed for the movement of people, the trade of goods like pottery, stone axes, and ceremonial items, and the quick mobilization of defense if needed. A road system of this sophistication implies a degree of political alliance or shared identity between towns. It suggests these were not isolated villages, but nodes in a regional civilization, a community of communities. Then we have the residential hubs, the towns themselves. Their layout is incredibly revealing. The classic circular plan, with a large central plaza surrounded by a ring of domestic dwellings and an outer defensive ditch, is a blueprint for social life. The plaza was the heart, a space for public meetings, ceremonies, games, and communal decision-making. The homes facing inward toward this common ground emphasize collective living over private isolation. The surrounding ditch and palisade speak to a need for protection, but also to a clear definition of social space. Inside was the ordered world of the village, outside was the wild, managed forest. This design fostered a strong, cohesive community identity. Perhaps the most profound interpretation comes from what these structures are not made of. Fawcett dreamed of a city that looked like something from classical antiquity or the Andes, built to defy time with stone. The Amazonian builders thought differently. They used the materials their environment provided in abundance, earth and wood. Their pyramids were earthen platforms, their walls were living palisades of trees. Their monuments were shaped soil. This was not a compromise, it was a brilliant adaptation. In a hot, humid climate where stone is scarce, building with earth was practical, sustainable, and allowed for rapid construction and modification. Their civilization was literally rooted in the land, designed to be part of the ecosystem, not to dominate it. The earthworks themselves were a form of environmental management. The ditches controlled water flow, preventing flooding in the rainy season and storing water in the dry. The raised fields and terra preta gardens were feats of agricultural engineering that turned poor soil into lasting fertility. This was a civilization that didn't just live in the Amazon, it collaborated with it. They were not conquerors of the green void, but its masterful gardeners. So what does this tell us about the people? It paints a picture of a complex, hierarchical society capable of large-scale, coordinated labor. It shows a people with advanced knowledge of engineering, hydrology, and astronomy. It reveals a social world centered on community and ceremony, connected by trade and shared culture across surprisingly long distances. Their achievement was not in building eternal stone towers, but in creating a sustainable, harmonious, and deeply human landscape that supported thriving populations for centuries. Fawcett's classical city was a fantasy of permanence, a monument to the past. The real civilization of the Amazon was a living, breathing dialogue with the present, a testament to the idea that true sophistication lies not in fighting nature, but in understanding its rhythms and writing your story into the very land beneath your feet. The most important map to the ancient cities was not drawn on paper but carried in memory. For the Cuicuro people of Brazil's Upper Xingu, the stories of Cuicugu are not legends of a vanished world, they are family history. When archaeologist Michael Heckenberger first arrived in their territory, he did not come with a theory to prove, but with questions to ask. He sat with the elders and listened. They spoke of the old roads, the wide ones their ancestors built, now hidden under roots and soil. They pointed to the locations of ancient plazas, places where ceremonies were once held, now clearings they still used. They named the sites Cuicugu, Ipatzi, no Kugu. For the Cuicuro, these were not lost cities waiting to be discovered by outsiders. They were the tangible, sacred geography of their own past, places they had always known and often lived upon. This collaboration transformed the search from an extraction into a conversation. Heckenberger and his team would use scientific instruments to confirm what the oral histories had preserved for centuries. They would scan an area with ground-penetrating radar, and the machine would reveal the outline of a massive circular ditch exactly where an elder said a village boundary had been. The proof was in the perfect alignment of story and soil. The Kuikuro knowledge provided the precise coordinates, and the technology provided the visual proof, creating a powerful fusion of tradition and science. This partnership reveals a profound truth. The ancient builders of those earthworks and roads were not some mysterious, extinct people. They were the direct ancestors of the men and women living in the Xingu today. The cultural continuity is astonishing. Modern Kuikuro villages are still laid out in the same circular pattern around a central plaza, a living architectural echo of the ancient towns. Their social rituals, their community-focused life, even their management of the forest gardens, all carry forward the legacy of that sophisticated civilization. The sites are not archaeological ruins to them, they are ancestral homes. When a Kuikuro person walks through the forest and sees a certain cluster of trees or a particular rise in the land, they do not see wilderness. They see the footprint of their great-grandmother's house, the curve of an old defensive wall, the path to a ceremonial ground. This perspective turns the entire legend on its head. For a century, the outside world asked, where is the lost city? The Kuikuro and their neighbors, tribes like the Kalapalo and Yowalapiti, have always known the answer. It is here, it is us. The city was never lost, only its meaning was lost to those who could not hear its story. The true treasure of Z was not gold or stone, but this unbroken thread of memory, a living culture that survived catastrophe and carries the wisdom of its builders in its songs, its stories, and the very layout of its villages. The greatest discovery of modern archaeology in the Amazon, then, is not a collection of artifacts but this realization of continuity. It forces a humbling correction to the adventure narrative. Percy Fawcett saw himself as a discoverer entering a blank space. In truth, he was a visitor walking into a library, but he could not read the books. The librarians were all around him, but he did not know how to ask them the right questions. The real truth behind the legend is not a pinpoint on a map but a people. It is the understanding that the past is not always buried. Sometimes it is standing right beside you, telling you its name if you are finally ready to listen. The legend of Z is wrapped in layers of misunderstanding, and to see the truth clearly, we must peel them back one by one. The first and most persistent myth is the idea of the Amazon as an untouched wilderness, a pristine Eden untouched by human hands before Europeans arrived. This could not be further from reality. What explorers like Fawcett saw as a savage, impenetrable jungle was actually a carefully managed landscape, a vast garden cultivated over millennia. The evidence is in the very soil. Those patches of incredibly fertile terra preta are not natural accidents. They are the deliberate, slow work of human agriculture. The forest itself is filled with useful trees like the Brazil nut and the acai palm that did not just happen to grow in convenient clusters, they were planted and tended. The ancient Amazonians were not passive inhabitants of a green desert. They were active forest gardeners who shaped their environment to support large, settled populations. They were not living in spite of the jungle, they were living in partnership with it. This leads directly to the second great myth, that advanced civilizations must leave behind grand stone ruins to prove their sophistication. We are conditioned by images of Egyptian pyramids and Roman colosseums to equate civilization with permanent, monumental architecture. The Amazonian builders operated on a different but no less brilliant logic. In a hot, wet environment where stone is rare and wood rots quickly, they built with the most abundant and suitable materials, earth and living plants. Their pyramids were earthen platforms, their defensive walls were living palisades of trees, their roads were raised causeways of packed soil. To dismiss these as primitive because they are not made of granite is to miss the point entirely. This was sustainable, adaptive engineering. A stone city in the rainforest would be a logistical nightmare, while an earthen city could be built, modified, and maintained by the community using local resources. Their genius was not in defying their environment with imported materials, but in mastering it with what was already there. The civilization was not in the stone, it was in the soil, the social organization, and the profound knowledge of ecology required to sustain it. Our third misconception revolves around the man who started it all. Percy Fawcett is often cast as a purely heroic, tragic explorer, a noble seeker of truth undone by a hostile wilderness. This romantic portrait ignores the complex and problematic reality. Fawcett was very much a product of his time, a British imperial officer with a colonial mindset. He saw himself as a discoverer entering a blank space on the map, a terra nullius waiting for his interpretation. He often viewed the indigenous peoples through a lens of paternalism or suspicion, valuing some as loyal guides while dismissing others as potential savages. His quest, while driven by personal obsession and a genuine, if flawed, intuition, was also an extension of an era that believed the secrets of the world were there for European men to uncover and claim. Recognizing this does not erase his courage or his endurance, but it adds necessary depth to his story. He was not a modern, collaborative anthropologist. He was a man carrying the baggage of his age into the heart of a continent, and that baggage shaped everything he saw and failed to see. Finally, we must dismantle the core myth of the legend itself, the idea that Z is a single, undiscovered location, a X marking the spot on a secret map. This notion is the most seductive and the most misleading. A century of searching for that one lost city was a century spent looking for the wrong thing. The truth, as revealed by Lydia and archaeology, is that Z was never a place. It is a metaphor for an entire lost world, a civilization of interconnected garden cities spread across thousands of square miles. The real discovery is not a pinpoint, but a pattern, not a ruin, but a relationship between people and landscape. Fawcett heard echoes of Kuhakugu and imagined a single Rome in the jungle. He was listening to one note and missing the symphony. The lost city we dreamed of is everywhere and nowhere, a testament to a way of life that flourished and then faded, leaving its signature not in carved stone, but in the shaped earth and the enduring memory of the forest itself. The greatest treasure was never hidden in a vault. It was growing all around us, waiting for our perspective to change so we could finally see it. The future of exploration demands a new map, one drawn not by outsiders seeking glory, but in partnership with the people who call the land home. The old model, the lone adventurer plunging into the unknown to extract its secrets, belongs to a different century. Today, the ethical path forward is clear. We must replace conquest with collaboration. This means approaching a place like the Amazon not as a puzzle to be solved by outsiders, but as a living library where indigenous communities are the head librarians. Their oral histories, their intimate knowledge of the forest's rhythms and resources, are not just clues, they are the primary texts. True exploration now begins with listening, with permission, and with the understanding that the goal is shared understanding, not personal fame or material gain. The sovereignty of these communities over their ancestral lands is not an obstacle to discovery, it is the foundation of it. When archaeologists like Michael Heckenberger work alongside the Kuakuro, they are not just using local guides, they are engaging in a dialogue where science validates tradition and tradition guides science. This partnership rewrites the purpose of the quest itself. It shifts the objective from finding a thing to understanding a story that has been kept alive for generations in the very place it happened. Technology plays a crucial but carefully considered role in this new model. Tools like Lydia are revolutionary precisely because they are non-invasive. An aircraft can fly overhead, its lasers mapping the shape of the land without a single tree being cut, without a single trench being dug in a sacred space. This data then becomes a powerful tool for collaboration. Scientists and community members can look at the digital models together, with elders pointing to a feature on the screen and saying, "Yes, that is where our stories say the old plaza was." The machine confirms the memory, and the memory gives meaning to the machine's data. Technology becomes a bridge, not a bulldozer. It allows us to see the grand scale of ancient achievements while keeping our feet firmly planted in the ethical present, respecting the land and its people. This approach actively works against the damage of the past. It seeks to heal the wounds inflicted by a century of intrusive searches for Fawcett and his city, which treated the Amazon as a backdrop for drama rather than a homeland with rights. Ultimately, this collaborative, respectful model of exploration leads us to the most profound treasure of all, a complete rewriting of human history. For centuries, our textbooks presented the Amazon as a footnote, a green void that civilizations bypassed. The heroic narrative was reserved for the stone pyramids of Egypt and the empires of the Andes. The discoveries made through partnership with indigenous communities have shattered that narrow view. We now know that the Amazon was a cradle of innovation, home to millions of people who built a unique, sustainable, and profoundly sophisticated civilization. This isn't just about adding a new chapter to the history book, it's about correcting a fundamental error in the story of humanity itself. It proves that greatness is not defined by a single material or a single style of architecture, but by the universal human capacity to create complex, cooperative societies in harmony with our environment. The lost city of Z was a phantom, but the truth it pointed toward is more valuable than any chest of gold. It is the recognition that the greatest discoveries await us not in the depths of the jungle, but in the depth of our collaboration, in our willingness to finally hear the stories that the land and its people have been waiting to tell. There is a ghost that haunts every map, a whisper in the empty spaces where the cartographer writes "Here be dragons." The legend of Z is not an isolated story, but a symptom of a much older, deeper human longing. We are drawn to lost cities for the same reason we are drawn to campfire tales and starlit skies. We are wired for wonder. Our fascination with places like Z, Atlantis, or El Dorado is a complex psychological engine fueled by more than just curiosity. It is a romance with the unknown, a rebellion against the mundane, and a profound desire to believe that history holds greater secrets than our textbooks admit. At its core, the chase is about the thrill of the search itself. The figure of the solitary explorer, like Percy Fawcett, embodies a fantasy of ultimate agency and discovery. He represents the individual pitted against the vast, indifferent wild, armed with nothing but will and a map. This archetype taps into a deep-seated yearning for a time when the world still held blank spaces, when one person's courage could rewrite what we know about our planet. It is a narrative of heroic individualism that resonates powerfully even in our interconnected age, but the object of the search is equally telling. A lost city is not just a collection of old buildings, it is a promise. It is proof that a grander, more poetic past existed, one that was perhaps wiser, more noble, or more magical than our own. Atlantis represents a fallen utopia. El Dorado symbolizes limitless wealth. Z promised a sophisticated civilization in a place we had written off as primitive. These legends allow us to believe that greatness is not always linear, that it can be forgotten, buried, waiting to be rediscovered. They comfort us with the idea that not all glory is behind glass in a museum. Some of it might still be out there, hidden under a mound of earth or a canopy of leaves. This obsession speaks volumes about our modern condition. In an era where satellite imagery has mapped every mountain and algorithm predicts our desires, the idea of a genuine geographical mystery is intoxicating. It represents a frontier that technology has not yet fully tamed, a last bastion for the romantic imagination. The lost city legend is a form of resistance against a world that feels exhaustively documented and explained. It keeps alive the tantalizing possibility that we might be wrong, that the world still has the capacity to astonish us with a revelation from the past. Furthermore, these quests often serve as mirrors, reflecting the values and anxieties of the cultures that pursue them. The Spanish conquistadors who hunted El Dorado projected their own greed onto the continent, seeking literal mountains of gold. Fawcett, a man of the fading British Empire, sought a different kind of prize, intellectual conquest and validation of a grand historical theory. Our contemporary searchers, armed with idea and guided by indigenous knowledge, reflect a different set of values: collaboration, technological mastery, and a desire for ecological wisdom. The lost city we look for is often the one we feel we need. So, what does our enduring chase for Z ultimately reveal? It shows that we are storytellers as much as we are scientists. We need myths to frame our explorations, to give our curiosity a shape and a name. The physical truth of Cuhucugu and the Upono Valley is astounding, but it was the psychological power of the legend, the dream of a single, shining Z, that drove a century of searching and, ironically, helped fund the science that uncovered the broader, richer truth. The Lost City is a siren song, calling us not just across physical distance, but across the landscape of our own hopes. It asks us what we value, what we fear is missing, and what we still believe might be waiting just beyond the edge of the map, in the beautiful, haunting silence of the unknown. The dense green that swallowed Percy Fawcett also preserved a forensic riddle. While science now illuminates the civilization he sought, the fate of the man himself remains a stubborn, personal enigma, drawing investigators back to the jungle with tools far more precise than a pith helmet and a machete. The most credible modern investigations have shifted from romantic speculation to a careful sifting of physical evidence, no matter how scant. Teams have returned to the areas described in Kalapalo oral histories, employing ground-penetrating radar and soil analysis on suspected grave sites. They search not for a city, but for a specific chemical signature, the faint trace of human decomposition, or a single artifact like a brass button from a British Army uniform. These searches are exercises in extreme patience, battling the same elements that likely claimed Fawcett, all for the chance to find a discoloration in the soil or a fragment of non-native metal. The jungle decomposes and reclaims with breathtaking efficiency, leaving behind a crime scene with no body, no weapon, and fading memories. One of the most famous pieces of supposed evidence came to be known simply as the Fawcett bones. In 1951, a Brazilian explorer named Orlando Villas Boas was given a skeleton by a local tribe who claimed it was the Colonel's. The bones were examined and even brought to London, where Percy's son Brian provided a dental sample for comparison. The conclusion was definitive: the skeleton was not Fawcett's, the teeth did not match, and the bone structure was inconsistent. This episode is a microcosm of the entire mystery, a tantalizing lead that generates global headlines only to dissolve under scientific scrutiny, leaving the core question untouched. If we could interview experts on survival in that environment, they would paint a grimly probable picture. A historical forensics specialist might note that without a grave, the most likely causes of death leave no lasting structural evidence: disease, starvation, or drowning. A survival expert would explain how quickly a small, undersupplied party could become disoriented and desperate in such a landscape, where finding clean water and safe food is a daily challenge that turns lethal with one wrong choice. The consensus among those who study the Amazon's realities rather than its legends is that Fawcett, Jack, and Raleigh most likely met a quiet, tragic end from a combination of these factors, their final camp overgrown by roots and vines within a single rainy season. The truth of his final days is likely forever fused with the forest floor, a secret the Amazon seems determined to keep. Yet, the poignant quest to find the man endures, a powerful subplot to the grand archaeological story. It is a reminder that history is made not just of sweeping civilizations, but of individual human journeys, of a father and son who walked into the green and never walked out. We keep looking for Fawcett because on some level we need to close the circle, to give a definitive rest to a story that has haunted us for a century. But perhaps the jungle's silence is the most fitting epitaph, a permanent monument to the vast, humbling unknown that he dedicated his life to exploring. Less than 10% of the Amazon basin has been surveyed by those revealing lasers. Think about that number for a moment. It means over 90% of that colossal green world, an area larger than the continental United States, remains a mystery to our new, piercing eyes. The implications are staggering. Every new LiDAR flight is a roll of the dice, and the results so far suggest we have been winning without even knowing the size of the game. If the 10% we have seen contains the vast garden cities of the Xingu, the geometric earthworks of Acre, and the urban sprawl of the Upono Valley, what unimaginable wonders does the other 90% conceal? The logical projection is not a handful of new sites, but hundreds, perhaps thousands of them. We could be standing at the threshold of discovering not just another lost city, but an entire lost continent of human history, a parallel cradle of civilization that flourished in the heart of the rainforest while empires rose and fell elsewhere. The potential scale is humbling, a civilization that may have been as populous and interconnected as any in the pre-Columbian Americas, its story still buried under a canopy of leaves. This thrilling potential, however, exists within a terrifying race against time. The very technology that allows us to see these ancient cities is matched by forces that threaten to erase them forever. Modern deforestation for cattle ranching and soy agriculture doesn't just burn trees, it scrapes away the topsoil, obliterating the subtle earthworks and the precious terra preta in a single pass of a bulldozer. Illegal gold mining operations tear into riverbanks and forest floors with toxic mercury, poisoning waterways and dissolving the context of any nearby site. Climate change itself is altering the very rainfall patterns that the ancient engineers so masterfully managed, bringing more intense droughts and floods that can destabilize these fragile earthen structures. Each hectare cleared, each river poisoned, isn't just an ecological loss, it is the burning of a library we have only just learned exists. An archaeological site in the Amazon isn't like a stone pyramid in the desert, visible for miles. It is a pattern in the soil, a whisper of elevation. Once that soil is churned or washed away, the city dies a second, final death, leaving no ghost for even LiDAR to detect. This creates a profound and urgent question. Will we ever know the full, true scale of this lost civilization? The answer depends entirely on the choices we make now. The pace of discovery is accelerating, but it is in a desperate sprint against the pace of destruction. The future of this exploration hinges on a new kind of partnership, one that merges cutting-edge science with indigenous stewardship and aggressive conservation. Imagine a future where LiDAR surveys are prioritized for areas most at risk from frontier deforestation, creating a digital archive of the ancient landscape before it is gone. Picture archaeologists, ecologists, and tribal communities working together, using these maps not just to study the past, but to defend the forest of the present, proving its irreplaceable cultural value to the world. The lost cities can become powerful allies in the fight to save the rainforest, not as sites for tourist extraction, but as sacred anchors for the living ecosystem and its guardians. The final chapter of The Lost City of Z is not written in a history book. It is being written now in the planning of flight paths, in the protection of indigenous territories, and in the global recognition that the Amazon is not a warehouse of resources, but the archive of a human achievement we are only beginning to comprehend. The greatest discovery may still lie ahead, not as a single golden artifact, but as a complete reweaving of the human story, showing us the breathtaking ingenuity of societies that thrived by nurturing their world rather than conquering it. The jungle has kept its secrets for 500 years. Our task is to listen, to see, and to protect them before the final page is turned by forces that see only timber and ore, blind to the kingdoms beneath their feet. So the truth, after a century of searching, is both simpler and more magnificent than the legend. Percy Fawcett was not wrong about the existence of a great civilization. He was simply looking for it in the wrong form. The lost city of Z was never a single, glittering ruin on a map. It was a symbol, a ghostly echo of a reality that stretched for thousands of miles. The real Z was the vast network of garden cities, earthworks, and roads built by millions of people who mastered the Amazon long before European ships ever appeared on the horizon. Theirs was a civilization written not in stone but in soil, a testament to a different kind of genius, one of sustainable living and profound ecological knowledge. Fawcett's tragic quest, fueled by equal parts intuition and obsession, acted as a century-long catalyst. His disappearance created a mystery so compelling that it refused to be forgotten, drawing generation after generation of seekers whose collective efforts, however flawed, slowly peeled back the canopy. He was the man who asked the question, even if he could not comprehend the answer. The real discovery, made not with a machete but with lasers and listening, is that the Amazon's deepest secret was not a treasure vault but a library. Its shelves hold the story of human resilience and ingenuity in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. It is a story that rewrites our understanding of the Americas, proving that civilization blossomed in the humid heart of the continent just as surely as it did in the deserts and the mountains. The final, powerful thought is this: the greatest treasure we can ever unearth is not gold or silver, but recovered memory. It is the understanding that these landscapes we call wild are often palimpsests, layered with the stories of those who came before. The legacy of Z is no longer a mystery to be solved, but a lesson to be learned about collaboration with nature, the diversity of human achievement, and the quiet persistence of history. As the lasers continue their silent mapping and indigenous communities share their ancestral knowledge, we are all witnesses to a new kind of exploration, one that values wisdom over conquest. The adventure did not end with Fawcett's last letter, it simply changed its course. Our task now is to listen, to protect, and to marvel at the truth that finally emerged from the green, a truth far more wondrous than any fairy tale.